part 3 of lecture 1. Let's do some interesting thing. So we have talked about program development, program translation, and about errors and so forth. Now it's time to look into some programming language comparison thing with the idea of getting into Python overview after that, right? So here let's do a little bit of a comparison of C versus Python. The reason being that, okay, and if you read the notes in the provided notes, you will see that we have some discussion there on different kind of programming languages and so forth. Some detailed discussions is there. Here we are summarizing most of the things, right? And it will be useful to, we are going to actually use Python language. And you may be wondering why bother to discuss C versus Python. It's just to give you an idea of what yet another language looks like, right? So that is the purpose here, right? Although we are going to use just Python, it's good to have some knowledge, awareness about another language and what are the similarities, what are the differences, right? So let's proceed. So to do this comparison, let's use an example. So what is the example here? Okay, develop a program that outputs the message "Hello World." Very simple statement. We just want to output these two words, "Hello World," followed by exclamation mark. Now let's consider, okay, a C program and a Python program to achieve this, right? Okay, so let's first look at the C program. A C program would look like this. The first line here is actually called a comment. That's not part of the source code. This is the comments. Now C program comments can look like this. In Python, comments can look a different format. So whatever the language, comments are included for humans information. Like a person who developed the program will add certain things which are not part of the source code for various purposes. Here, just indicate the name of the file. Maybe you can have other comments explaining what is really happening here, right? And a compiler or an interpreter will simply ignore those things because they are not meant to be translated. They are not part of source code, right? Although they are included. Now, after that, only you get the actual C code here. So how many lines are there? Line number 1, line 2, line 3, consisting on only this one, line number 3, line 4, line 5, line 6. Line 6 also consisting only of this curly brace. This is the opening brace, this is the closing brace, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. Although you can maybe perhaps not count these two, then there are 4 lines of code. And you can see the message to be displayed is written here, "Hello World." And printf is basically, we are calling a function called printf. And we are asking the computer to display this message on screen. After the exclamation mark, you can see this, we call \n. This is basically to take when you display it on a computer terminal, after displaying the "Hello World" and the exclamation mark, this tells the cursor to be taken to the next line. So you have a line break, right? So that's the idea of this \n. It's called the new line character. Right, and okay, this one is a standard thing that let's not worry about too much about C language. I'll just explain this thing in a fairly simple manner, in a summarized way. Now, here's the Python program to achieve the same thing. And this one is basically a comment. So it gives, say, file name. Python source programs are basically named as something file name .py. The py extension is the standard way to indicate that it's a Python file. Whereas C source code files are named something .c, right? Now, what do you see here? The Python program has only one single line. We say print. That means we are using the print function, and inside the parentheses, we indicate the message that you want to display. There's no new line also here because the print in this case takes care of that. After displaying the hello world with the exclamation mark, the cursor is taken to the next line. There is an end of line anyway inserted by the print, right? So what do you see as a result here? I mean, after looking at these two, so you can see C program needs a few lines of code, whereas Python just one single line. So this is the nature of Python. In order to get some work done, in a C program, you may have to write several lines of code, for which a Python program may need just one or two lines, right? So that tells us how easy it is to use Python. Actually, the other thing is it's easy to learn as well. All right. Okay, let's proceed. So how do we then execute these programs? C program, we will compile the source because that's the most common way. C is basically being used. We have compiled implementations. You compile the source and run the executable machine code generated by the compiler. And of course, as I earlier explained, in addition to the object code that we get from the source code, translated source code, you may have to link certain other codes to produce the executable machine code, but the compiler will do all that. Usually a compiler consists of several parts, modules, and the final linking will also be done to produce the executable machine code by the compiler itself, the broader version of compiler, right? So in the case of Python program, you can feed the source code as input to the Python interpreter, right? That's basically how we get the program executed in the case of Python. So the Python interpreter will, we know how it's done, right? Translate, execute like that. It will keep doing that. Okay, so that gives us idea another comparison, right? And a kind of a difference between the compiled and interpreted environments. Okay, also to get an idea about the development process. So let's briefly look at this thing. How do you create a C program? I mean, even for any other program, any other language program also, you do some common things. It means you are using a text editor to create or modify whatever that source code, right? If it's a C, so you are editing C source code and save this code as files. That's how you get C programs, right? Using a text editor. Sometimes you can even use, if you don't have a sophisticated one, it doesn't matter. You can even use a very simple text editor, which people use for various other purposes also. For example, on Microsoft Windows, you can use a Notepad to edit a program. Always it's possible. Similarly, in Linux systems, there are so many editors like VI or Vim or gedit. All sorts of editors are there with which you can edit your programs. And C source files are given the extension .c file name. Then we can invoke the C compiler to compile it. Of course, depending on the development environment, that means if you are using an IDE, integrated development environment, which is like a graphical interface, the compilation may be done with a set of shortcut keys or using a mouse. Whereas if it is a command line thing, you would just type a command to invoke the compiler, and you provide to the compiler the particular files, source code files as input. Right? In the case of graphical or IDE, is integrated development environments, these things will be done without typing special commands, right? So here's just again, for completeness sake, how you would compile and run a C program on a operating system like Linux, where you do command line thing. You take go to the what you call a terminal window, and in that you type commands. Like, for example, to compile Linux operating system comes with a free compiler called GCC. It's a GNU C compiler. At the command line, you can type this command GCC space and give the file name. And if there are no syntax errors, it will produce an executable machine code. The default file name is a.out. Right? So this is the result of translation of this file as well as linking that with various other library code. It will produce this executable machine code file called a.out. Then, of course, in the command line, you have to just type the name a.out in this manner to get it executed. That's how it's basically run. Right, in the more details of these things are available in your the notes, and also in lab number 1, you will get some other additional opportunity to learn more about C as well. Try those examples. All right. Okay. Finally, in this comparison, you have this table, which is I have left these things blank. So this is the C column, this is the Python column. Time to learn. So from whatever we discussed so far, I think you should be able to say what will come here, what will come here. Maybe comparatively high and low. Already I have given these things, high and low for efficiency speed. I'll give me a moment to explain that. But until then, let's see, time to learn. What do you think? Right? You should be able to figure out from what we have described so far, and with the example given, the hello world example, you can have some idea about that. I suppose time to code. How much time do you have to produce or have a code a program in C and Python? Given a problem, let's say you are given one problem, and one person is going to develop a C program for it, another person is going to develop a Python program for it. Who do you think, let's say both have the same whatever level of, let's say, expert level, or same skill level? Of course, quite an expert in C language might also come up with the code fast enough. But generally speaking, we saw with C, in order to get even certain small amount of work done, you may have to write a lot of code. Whereas Python, you may not have to write that much code, right? So time to code, Python generally would be faster. You can develop a Python program quite faster because with Python language, you can do so many things by writing a small amount of code. What about code size? The number of lines. Again, we saw in our example, hello world, a C program was 6 lines in total, but even if you ignore the 2 braces, there were 4 lines of code. Whereas Python, we had just 1 line of code. So generally speaking, again, Python program for one task, for which you have written a C program also, the Python program would be shorter, less amount of code. So all these first 3 things, time to learn, time to code, code size, all these things, when you look at, you might see that Python is basically has a superior qualities, perhaps, right? You can learn it fast. You can code Python code faster. Code size is smaller. Okay, then, does it mean that Python is always better than C? Well, you have to look into this also. So while Python is really easy to use, easy to learn, all these things, when it comes to execution, it has certain drawbacks. It's slow. Its speed is low here. One reason being that we already talked about it. It's being interpreted, which means execution requires translation. And not only that, Python is so easy for programmers, which means programmers will write fairly straight, code which needs a lot of analysis and a lot of internal housekeeping things by the interpreter and other things behind the scenes, right? It's fairly hard to make things go fast, because it has to accommodate, it has to support so many things that are convenient for the programmers. While it is providing all these conveniences, it starts to become really complicated and really difficult to make things fast. So as a result, it actually has a slow execution. Whereas C, on the other hand, compiler, it is a compiled implementation, and at the time of compilation also, you can actually, because the C language is not really that much maybe user-friendly, or you have to actually write specific code to get things done. And there are certain rules, stricter rules about how to use various types of data and for various things, which means the programmer will follow those rules, and it makes easy for a compiler to understand things and optimize things and make the machine code faster. So as a result, you get faster or more efficient code produced, which means for the same task, the C program, which we get compiled also, will run faster almost always compared to a Python program. Of course, you have to understand this also. If you take some fairly simple program, the program examples are the programs that you develop in the semester 1 for CS1033. These are fairly simple programs, right? If you develop a program for such a problem, the problems that you encounter in your labs and other examples that we provide, let's say you have a C program as well as a Python program for the same problem, same computation, and you run both. Most likely, they will complete just in a fraction of a second. You won't see a difference between the Python and C programs with respect to the speed. That is because the programs were fairly simple. Not much computation was happening there. So the computers these days are quite fast. So even a Python program executed quite fast, because the amount of work, the amount of computation was a small amount of things. So you couldn't see a difference actually. But if you do a significant amount of computation, right? Maybe you have some iterative repeating things which you run millions of number of times, then you would see the C program will end faster, right? Will execute faster. All right, so that's basically to give you the reason we do this comparison is, you have to understand that there are a number of other languages out there. We use Python because it's easy to learn as well. For beginning programmers, it's useful to have such a language. But you have to have some awareness about at least some of the language, and maybe see what similarities and what differences are there. Have a comparison and contrasting, right? So that's the purpose of doing this comparison. With that, we end the part 3 of lecture number 1.